I thought therapy was supposed to save me, not make me fall in love with the man who was supposed to fix me. And yet, there he was, me therapist, the only person who dared to look me in the eye when I swore I was done with love forever. Ethan Rivers wasn't supposed to mean anything to me. He was just the guy I paid to sit across from me while I unraveled the mess my first love had left behind. But the way he listened, the way he spoke as if my pain wasn't something to be ashamed of, it was dangerous. Because every word pulled me closer. Every silence wrapped tighter around my throat. The last thing I needed was another man to haunt me. I wasn't new to heartbreak. My first love had broken me in ways I couldn't even articulate. Noah, with his reckless laugh and empty promises, had left New York with someone else's hand in his and a smile on his face, as if I had been just a pit stop on his way to something better. I spent months convincing myself I didn't care, that I was over it, but my chest still ached whenever I caught a glimpse of someone who looked like him on the subway. My heart still clenched when I passed the diner we used to go to. So I did the thing desperate people do, book therapy. But Ethan was not the therapist I expected. He didn't fit the sterile, clinical mold. He was warmth wrapped in human form, messy curls that caught the afternoon sun, a voice that dipped low when he asked me questions no one else dared to, and this unshakable patience that made me hate him just a little, because how dare he stay calm while I was falling apart. "You're not broken, Liam," he told me one afternoon, as I sat slouched in his chair, fighting the urge to disappear into myself. "You're grieving. That's not weakness. That's love trying to find a place to go." I hated how his words made me feel seen, how they lodged themselves in my ribs, burning like truth I didn't want to swallow. And yet I kept coming back, week after week, session after session, pretending I was here to forget Noah when, in reality, I was memorizing every detail about Ethan. The soft click of his pen as he wrote notes I was dying to read. The faint cologne that lingered long after I left his office. The way his gaze softened when I cracked a joke just to see if I could make him laugh. It was reckless, dangerous, impossible. He was my therapist. I was his patient. There were rules, ethics, entire careers that could crumble if anyone knew what was starting to take root between us. But desire doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for the right time. It simply ignites. And one night, it burned through the last of my resistance. That evening, the city outside his office was drowning in rain, neon lights blurred by the downpour. My shirt was soaked, sticking to my skin, and Ethan handed me a towel like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Stay a little longer," he said quietly, almost hesitantly, as though he was crossing a line just by offering. And I should have left. I should have run out the door because the moment I stayed, everything changed. His apartment wasn't far too close for excuses. Too intimate for what we were pretending not to feel. We ended up there without even deciding to, as if our feet knew where we were going long before our minds caught up. I remember standing in his kitchen, dripping water onto the hardwood, and watching him move around like he was trying to convince himself nothing was out of the ordinary. "You ever regret becoming a therapist?" I asked, leaning against the counter. He looked up, startled. "Why would I?" "Because people like me show up," I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. "People who don't know how to stop bleeding all over the place." His eyes softened. "People like you are the reason I became one." And then there was silence. The kind of silence that vibrates with the weight of everything unsaid. His gaze lingered too long. Mine refused to look away. I don't remember who moved first. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the storm outside, pushing us into each other's orbit with no chance of escape. But I remember the moment our lips met, gentle, hesitant, and then, when neither of us pulled away, devastatingly real. I remember the taste of rain still clinging to my skin, the way his hand found the back of my neck like it belonged there, the shudder that ran through me when I realized this wasn't therapy anymore. This was the beginning of something that could ruin us both. And yet, for the first time in years, I didn't care about the ruin. I cared about him. That night marked the point of no return. Every session after was laced with tension. Every word dripped with the memory of his mouth on mine. We tried to ignore it, pretended it didn't happen. But how do you ignore gravity? How do you unfeel the way his hand felt tangled in mine? The way his voice cracked when he whispered my name like it meant something more. It was a dangerous dance we played between professionalism and desire, between healing and hurting. And every step we took blurred the line further until the line no longer existed. But love doesn't come without a cost. And the world doesn't let two men like you bound by rules, the other bound by scars, simply fall into each other's arms without consequence. Because secrets always find a way of coming out. And when ours did, it threatened to destroy us both. The kiss should have ended there. A mistake, a slip, a momentary lapse in judgment. That's what Ethan tried to convince himself. That's what I tried to let myself believe too. But the human heart doesn't care about boundaries. Mine had already decided it wanted him, and no ethical line in the world was going to stop it. The next session, I tried to act like nothing happened. I walked into his office, sat down in the same chair, crossed my arms, and stared at the rug instead of him. The silence between us wasn't the familiar kind Anna Maria. It was sharp, loaded, full of the memory of his mouth against mine. "How have you been since we last talked?" he asked. His voice was careful, too careful, like a man testing the strength of thin ice before stepping forward. "Fine," I muttered. Lie number 1. "You don't look fine." "You're not supposed to tell me how I look," I snapped before I could stop myself. "You're supposed to let me say it first. That's how this works, isn't it?" His pen stilled. He set it down slowly, like I might break if he pushed too hard. "You're right. I overstepped. I'm sorry." The apology sat heavy in the room. He wasn't just apologizing for this. We both knew it. I wanted to yell at him, to demand why he kissed me when he knew damn well what it could cost. I wanted to tell him I hated him for making me feel again. Instead, I laughed bitter, hollow. "This is insane," I said. "You're supposed to be helping me forget someone else. Not," I cut myself off, "not become the person I can't stop thinking about." He closed his notebook and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, gaze steady on mine. "Liam, what happened between yous it wasn't professional. I know that, and I need to be honest with you. I've thought about it every single day since." The air was sucked out of the room. My pulse hammered against my ribs. "You're not supposed to say that," I whispered. "I know." His voice cracked, barely audible. "But if I don't, then I'm lying to you, and I promised myself I'd never lie to my patients." There it was, the confession I had wanted, dreaded, and craved all at once. The weeks blurred after that. Therapy became less about Noah, my ex, and more about everything I wasn't saying out loud. I'd walk into the office and sit across from Ethan, pretending we were still tethered by some semblance of professionalism, when really every word, every glance, every brush of silence between us was threaded with something unspeakable. One evening, after a session that left me raw, he stopped me as I reached for the door. "Liam," he said, his voice quiet but urgent. I turned, hand still on the knob. "Yeah." He hesitated, then shook his head. "Never mind. Have a good night." But I saw it look in his eyes, the war inside him. I went home and couldn't sleep. His voice, his face, his restraint, it all haunted me. And I realized something terrifying. I wasn't in therapy to forget Noah anymore. I was in therapy because it was the only way I could see Ethan without losing him completely. It all came crashing down sooner than I expected. One of the other therapists in the building, sharp-eyed, judgmental, saw us leaving together one evening. Ethan had offered me a ride home because it was pouring rain, and my umbrella had snapped in the wind. It was innocent, almost laughably so, but to anyone else it looked like more. By the following week, whispers had started. Ethan grew more cautious, his eyes flickering to the glass window of his office door every time I laughed too loudly, every time I lingered after a session. "This isn't sustainable," he admitted one night when I showed up outside his apartment, soaked again, but this time not from rain, this time from desperation. "I know," I whispered. "We can't." His voice broke. He ran a hand through his hair, looking more undone than I'd ever seen him. "If anyone finds out, I could lose my license, my career, Everything I've worked for. And what about me? My words came out harsher than I intended. You think I'm not risking anything? You think this doesn't terrify me? His shoulders sagged. Then why are you here? I stepped closer, close enough to see the tremor in his jaw, the way his breath hitched when I didn't back away. Because, I said, voice shaking, I'd rather risk everything than go back to feeling nothing. That broke something in him, or maybe it fixed it, I'll never know. But he kissed me again, this time not hesitant, not careful. This time it was fire and surrender and need all tangled into one. We became reckless after that. Secret dinners at out-of-the-way diners where no one knew us. Long drives to nowhere, where we'd park by the river and talk until dawn. His hand resting lightly over mine as if that small touch was enough to anchor us. Nights in his apartment where the world outside didn't exist, where his walls came down and I saw not just the therapist, but the man underneath, the one who laughed too easily at stupid movies, who loved jazz records, who carried his own quiet griefs he rarely spoke of. But reality has sharp edges. And no matter how carefully we tried to protect what we had, the world was waiting to cut us open. It was Noah who lit the fuse. Of all the people to walk back into my life, it had to be him. He showed up at the bar where I sometimes worked shifts, leaning casually against the counter like he hadn't shattered me into pieces a year ago. "Liam," he said, grinning. "Long time no see." I froze. My chest tightened. My hands trembled as I wiped down the counter, pretending not to care. "Didn't think you'd still be in the city," he added, sipping his beer like this was just another reunion. "Didn't think you'd care," I shot back. His grin faltered, just for a moment, before he shrugged it off. "Fair enough. You look good, though. Better than the last time I saw you. The last time, when he left me crying in the middle of a crowded street, begging him not to go. I wanted to tell him I wasn't the same Liam anymore, that I had someone now, someone who actually cared. But I couldn't, because saying Ethan's name out loud felt like painting a target on both our backs. Instead, I forced a smile. "Yeah, guess heartbreak makes good fuel for self-improvement." He laughed, low and familiar, and for the first time it didn't sting as much as it used to. Because Noah wasn't the man haunting me anymore. Ethan was. Still, I went home that night shaking, replaying every word, every look, every ounce of old pain Noah had stirred up. And when I walked into Ethan's apartment, he knew. He always knew. "What happened?" he asked, pulling me into his arms before I could even kick off my shoes. "Noah," I whispered into his shoulder. He tensed, just slightly, then kissed the top of my head. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." But I did. And for hours, I told him everything, every wound Noah had left, every scar I still carried. And Ethan listened, his arms around me, grounding me, until the words stopped hurting so much. By dawn, I realized something. Noah was my past. Ethan was my future. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to stop running from it. But the world wasn't ready for us. 2 weeks later, Ethan was called into a meeting with the ethics board. Someone had filed a complaint. Someone knew. When he told me, his face pale and drawn, I felt the floor vanish beneath me. "They'll take everything from me, Liam," he said, his voice breaking. "My license, my practice. I could lose it all." I reached for his hand, squeezing tight. "Then let me take the fall. Tell them it was me. Tell them I pushed you, that you tried to stop it." No, his refusal was immediate, fierce. "I won't let you do that. You've already been through enough. This is on me." We stared at each other, the weight of reality pressing in. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, not of losing his career, but of losing me. "I can't lose you, Liam," he whispered. "You won't," I promised, even though I had no idea how to keep that promise. Because love, as I was learning, isn't just about holding on. Sometimes it's about surviving the storm that wants to tear you apart. And our storm was only just beginning. The complaint wasn't just a rumor. It had a name attached to it. Noah. The board didn't tell Ethan who filed it, confidentiality and all that, but I knew. The timing, the sudden reappearance, the way Noah had smiled that night at the bar like he still held some power over me. He must have seen me with Ethan. Or maybe he'd heard something through the grapevine. Either way, he had his revenge. When Ethan told me, his voice flat and hollow, I felt the rage boil inside me. He doesn't get to do this, I said, pacing across the living room. He doesn't get to wreck me twice. First my heart, now our lives. Ethan cut in quietly. I froze. The way he said it plural, ours, it should have comforted me, but all I could feel was fear. What happens now? I asked. I meet with the board next week. They'll investigate. I'll have to explain. He rubbed his temples. If they dig too deep, if they find out, they won't. My voice cracked. They can't. But even as I said it, I knew hope was a flimsy shield. That week stretched on like a lifetime. Ethan tried to act calm, professional, detached. But I saw through him. The shadows under his eyes. The way his hands shook when he thought I wasn't looking. I stopped sleeping, too. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined a future without him. The thought was unbearable. One night, I showed up at his place with takeout and forced him to eat. We sat on his couch, cartons of lo mein between us, the TV flickering without sound. You ever think about running away? I asked suddenly. He looked at me, startled. Running away? Yeah, just packing up and leaving this city, this mess, starting over somewhere no one knows us. His lips parted, as if he wanted to say yes, as if he'd dreamed of it too. But then his shoulders slumped. That's not how life works, Liam. You can't just run from the consequences. Maybe not. But we could run toward something better. He didn't answer, but his hand found mine, squeezing it tight, as if holding on was the only answer he could give. The day of the hearing, I waited outside the board's office building. My chest was a battlefield, hope clashing with dread. When Ethan finally came out, hours later, he looked like he'd been hollowed out. His suit was wrinkled, his jaw tight, his eyes clouded. Well? I asked, rushing to him. They're deliberating, he said. Could be days, weeks. And what did you tell them? He hesitated. That pause gutted me. Ethan, I whispered. What did you tell them? I said we crossed boundaries, that I compromised my professionalism, that I should have referred you to another therapist the moment I realized I couldn't be objective. My throat tightened. You told them, I didn't name you, he cut in. I protected you. But yes, I told them enough. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to beg him to take it back. But deep down I knew he was right. Protecting me meant sacrificing himself. The fallout came faster than either of us expected. Clients pulled out. Colleagues stopped returning his calls. His once thriving practice began to bleed out. And the man who had built his entire life on being steady, composed, dependable was crumbling before my eyes. One evening, I found him sitting on his couch, head in his hands, an unopened bottle of whiskey on the table. You don't drink, I said softly. He didn't look up. Maybe I should start. I crossed the room, grabbed the bottle, and shoved it into the cabinet. Don't do that to yourself. His voice was ragged. I don't know who I am without this job, Liam. It's all I've ever had. All I've ever been good at. That's not true, I snapped. You're good at being kind, at listening, at loving. The word slipped out before I could stop it. He froze. Slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes locked on mine, searching, breaking, daring to hope. Say it again, he whispered. I love you, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I don't care what anyone else thinks. I don't care if the whole damn world comes after us. I love you. He inhaled sharply, like the words themselves filled his lungs for the first time. And then he pulled me into his arms, clutching me like he'd drown if he let go. But love didn't shield us from reality. Noah wasn't done. He showed up again, this time outside Ethan's building. I spotted him as I was leaving one evening, leaning against a lamppost, cigarette in hand, smirk on his lips. Cute place, he said, flicking ash onto the sidewalk. Didn't know therapists made this much money. I stiffened. What the hell are you doing here? Relax, Liam. Just checking in. Wanted to see the man who stole you away from me. You didn't lose me to anyone, I snapped. You threw me away. His smirk faltered for just a second. Then it hardened. Maybe, but you're making a mistake if you think this guy's gonna save you. He's already drowning. Can't you see it? He's finished. And when he goes down, he's taking you with him. I stepped closer, my fists clenched. You don't get to talk about him. You don't get to even say his name. Noah just laughed, flicked his cigarette to the ground, and walked away. But his words clung to me, like smoke I couldn't wash off. The investigation dragged on. Weeks turned into months. And in that time, Ethan withdrew more and more. He stopped seeing friends, stopped answering calls. His apartment grew messier, dishes piled in the sink, unopened mail scattered across the counter. One night, I came over and found him staring blankly at the wall, jazz records silent on the shelf. Ethan, I said softly, touching his shoulder. Talk to me. He shook his head. I don't want to drag you into this. You already did, I whispered. And I don't regret it. But you shutting me out, that's what hurts. His eyes brimmed with something raw, something unspoken. And then he whispered the words that shattered me. Maybe you should leave me, Liam. My chest caved. What? You deserve someone who isn't broken. Someone who won't ruin your life just by being in it. I grabbed his face, forcing him to look at me. Don't you dare. Don't you dare push me away to make some twisted sacrifice. I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not ever. For a long moment, he just stared at me, torn between fear and hope. Then, finally, he broke, tears spilling down his cheeks. And I held him, tighter than ever, vowing silently that I would weather every storm if it meant keeping him. But storms have a way of testing vows. A letter arrived 2 weeks later. Official. From the board. Ethan's license was suspended pending further review. Effective immediately. He read it once, then set it down with shaking hands. His face went pale, like the blood had drained out of him. This is it, he whispered. It's over. I shook my head violently. No, it's not. It can't be. But the truth was undeniable. The life he'd built, the career he'd poured his soul into it was slipping through his fingers. And no matter how tightly I held on to him, I couldn't stop it. We sat together in silence, the weight of the letter pressing down on us. For the first time, I felt the true depth of our love's cost. And yet, when he turned to me, eyes glassy but steady, and said, I still don't regret you. I knew we'd already chosen our path, no matter what it destroyed. The weeks after Ethan's suspension felt like living in the ruins of a fire. The smoke had cleared, the flames were gone, but the wreckage remained. He was a shell of himself. The man who once held himself with quiet confidence now avoided mirrors, flinched when the phone rang, and spent hours staring out the window as if the city had turned into a stranger overnight. I tried to hold him together, cooking meals he barely ate, making him laugh with jokes that fell flat, pulling him into my arms when I felt him slipping too far into silence. But nothing I did could erase the truth. His life as he knew it was gone. And still, he never once told me to leave again. Maybe he finally believed me when I said I wouldn't. One night, months later, we lay on his bed, the summer air heavy with humidity. The window was cracked open, the sounds of New York drifting in horns, laughter, the hum of life moving forward without us. Do you ever regret it? I asked suddenly. He turned his head toward me, his curls brushing the pillow. Regret what? Me. All of this. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he reached over, threading his fingers through mine. Every day, I regret losing my career. I regret the choices I made as a professional. But you, Liam, his voice cracked, but his gaze stayed steady. You are the only thing I don't regret. My throat tightened. Even if we never get out of this? Even if this is a thiding, scraping by, trying to build something new from nothing? He smiled, tired but true. Then we'll build it. Together. And for the first time in months, I believed him. The rebuilding didn't happen overnight. Ethan picked up part-time work consulting, tutoring grad students, anything to keep the bills paid. I took more shifts at the bar, juggling exhaustion with determination. Slowly, life found a new rhythm. Messy, imperfect, but ours. But the world hadn't forgotten. Whispers still followed us in certain circles. Friends vanished, unwilling to choose sides. Family questioned, doubted, worried. When I finally told my sister about Ethan, she stared at me across her kitchen table, shock written all over her face. "Liam," she whispered, "he was your therapist." "He isn't anymore," I said firmly. "That's not the point. Don't you see how dangerous this looks? How everyone will judge? I don't care." My voice was sharper than I intended, but I meant it. "I love him. That's all that matters." She searched my face, torn between worry and understanding. Finally, she sighed. "If he makes you happy, then I'll try to understand." It wasn't approval, but it was a start. Ethan's path back was harder. Months turned into a year, and the board finally reached a decision. His license would not be reinstated. The verdict was final. He read the letter in silence, then set it down with steady hands. I braced myself for the collapse, the spiral, the despair. But instead, he exhaled slowly and said, "Then I guess it's time to let this chapter go." I blinked. Just like that. His lips curved, bittersweet but sure. "I've spent so long clinging to what I lost. Maybe it's time to see what I can build instead." In that moment, I realized Ethan was stronger than even he believed. And maybe, just maybe, so was I. The years that followed weren't easy, but they were ours. Ethan opened a small community center with the little savings he had left, offering workshops, group counseling sessions, and safe spaces for people who couldn't afford traditional therapy. He wasn't a licensed therapist anymore, but he was still Ethan, still someone who listened, who healed, who cared. I watched him grow into this new role, watched the light return to his eyes, and I knew he hadn't lost his purpose. He'd just found a different way to fulfill it. And me? I finally stopped living in Noah's shadow. He remained a ghost in my past, but no longer a wound. Loving Ethan had taught me something Noah never could, that love wasn't about being consumed. It was about being seen. 3 years after the day everything fell apart, we stood on the rooftop of our apartment building, the city sprawling beneath us. The air was cool, the sky streaked with gold as the sun dipped low. Ethan leaned against the railing, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You remember the night you asked me if I ever regret us?" "Yeah. I've thought about that a lot, and the truth is I do regret it. Not because of what we have, but because of how it started. Because I crossed lines I should never have crossed. I hurt myself. I hurt you." He turned to me, his eyes shining. "But if I had the chance to go back, to do it all over, I'd still find you. Somehow, someway, I'd still find you." I swallowed hard, my chest aching with the weight of his words. "Ethan." He stepped closer, his hand cupping my face, his thumb brushing the corner of my mouth. "You once said you'd rather risk everything than go back to feeling nothing. And I realize now you gave me that, too. You made me feel again." The city lights flickered to life around us, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. "I love you," he said simply. I smiled, tears burning my eyes. "I love you, too." And then we kissed, slow, tender, certain. Not reckless, not desperate. Just two men who had walked through fire and come out the other side, scarred but still standing. Love hadn't saved us from pain. It hadn't erased the past or silenced the whispers. But it had given us something else, something rarer, something truer. The future. Not perfect, not easy, but ours. And that was enough. The therapist had given me a cure to forget my first love. But in the end, he became the one I could never let go. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point all along. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.